Hey, so I'm Skylar. Let's talk about Jujutsu. But first, I want to tell you about Plato's Cave. Show of hands, how many of you have heard of this before? Okay, a few of you. I'll be quick. The story is that there's a guy chained in a cave. Actually, several guys, some prisoners. And all they can see is the shadows that objects make when they pass in front of some light, the shadows that the objects cast on the cave wall. One day, one of the people gets let out of the cave, and at first, the sun is really blinding. But after a while, he gets to see things in the real world. He goes back to the cave and tries to explain it to his friends. But the rest of the prisoners can't understand it, because how could you? How could you know what the real world is like when you've only seen the shadows on the cave wall? Now, when Plato told this story, he was trying to get you into philosophy. His idea was that philosophy can tell you about the objects outside the cave of life. But I think this is relevant when talking about tech, too, because quite often, to understand why a thing is quite so good, you've got to experience it. Many of you may have seen this before with explaining Gerrit to people. Now, you've probably all used Gerrit. Many of you may have tried explaining it to your colleagues, and many of your colleagues may have responded like this. Why do I need to change my workflow? GitHub works fine. It's good for me. Now, Jujutsu and Gerrit, they're very much alike in this. They're not so different. It's very hard for me to explain to you why Jujutsu is so good. So I'm going to try and show you. I'm not going to tell you about all of the massive UX improvements that it provides. I'm not going to tell you about JJ Undo, although that's a thing that people miss from Git a bunch. I'm not going to tell you about how rev sets can allow you to filter commits by description anywhere rather than just with the Git pickaxe. I'm not going to tell you about how the op log is a much better time log than Git's ref log ever was. Or about how very much you can use Git and Jujutsu alongside each other. And even though I'm at the Gerrit Summit, I'm going to talk a surprisingly brief amount about the new Gerrit integration with Jujutsu. Because I need to show you something more important. If I tell you about all of these things, and they are great things, you should go and look up these afterwards. Then you will go away happy, and the Gerrit Forge people who invited me here will go away happy. And you will not use Jujutsu, because you will have no reason to. So instead, let's talk about what Jujutsu does that thinks about your commits so differently that I think you should start using it today. Let's talk about the staging area. Here's a command in Git. It shows you the changes that you've made that are unstaged since the previous commit. Here's the version that shows you the changes that are staged since the previous commit. Here's the version that shows you everything. And maybe that's not too hard, but there are 3 variants of a command to show you what you did since the last time you committed. And that's a little bit odd, maybe. Let me go again. Here's the command to commit changes. This only commits changes that you've staged. So if you want to commit everything, maybe you think of the -a flag. That almost does it, but not quite, because if you've created a new file, it won't stage it. So actually, maybe you have to do -A, and then you can run git commit. The problem's not remembering all of these flags, although that is part of the problem. But it's that things in the staging area are treated fundamentally differently from your commits, and are treated fundamentally differently from things which you haven't staged yet. In Jujutsu, here's how you diff. Rather than having a staging area, Jujutsu has a single commit that you're on now that you edit, and you can move around to edit other commits. So you can diff the current revision, you can diff the previous revision, or you can diff multiple revisions at once, all with the same command in very much the same way. You might think it's a little bit weird, right? Oh, I'm editing a revision. How does that work? But you're used to this already if you use Gerrit. You've uploaded new patch sets to a Gerrit change and seen commits get updated. you're used to this. Jujutsu takes it and puts it on your computer. Jujutsu has a way to see past patch sets as well. You can do it with the evolution log. You can show that for the current commit, for a previous commit, or something else entirely. Here's my evolution log for commit FA10027. As you can see, this is what Jujutsu shows me, and it matches up perfectly with what I uploaded to Gerrit. Gerrit has a third patch set there. That's the submit patch set. So this wasn't created on my computer, so Jujutsu doesn't have it in the history of how the change went for me. But Jujutsu also keeps everything else. Here's the whole history of the change. Here's much more of it, at least. Jujutsu, every time I run a command, snapshots the repository. So unlike in Git, where you have to commit everything explicitly, Jujutsu will keep a copy of it, so you can always make sure that you can roll back to a past revision. You can ask Jujutsu to show you patches as well. Here's the latest patch for that change. As you can see, I made a typo in my commit message. I typed is editable as editable. I changed it, I pushed it up to Gerrit. But Jujutsu also kept track of other things too. Here's when I resolved a conflict. This is something that Git would make very hard for you to see. But Jujutsu has conflicts as first class. You can see my resolution in the history of the change. Let's go again. Commit messages. When I type git commit, I've got to type my commit message immediately. So Git forces me into this workflow of I write some code, I commit some or all of it, and I write a message for it. If I want to edit the previous message, I can use the amend flag to do that. Jujutsu, when I type jjnew, doesn't make me describe the change immediately. Instead, I have a change with no description. As I edit code, I still don't have to set a description. I only have to do that when I want to. I can type jjdescribe, and Jujutsu will pop up an editor ready for me to describe my change. Hello, Gerrit User Summit. But like the other JJ commands, I can do that with other changes too. I can do that with the current change, but I can also do that with the change previous, or even something else entirely. Here's a log of several changes, and you can see this change which starts with MT, this style format with tree format commit. If I run jjdescribe-r MT, Jujutsu will open up the editor for that, and I can edit its description even though it's somewhere in the past. Now, you may have noticed I omitted how to edit a past description in Git, and that's because there are several ways to do that, but none of them are very nice. Here's how I would do that with interactive rebasing. Here's the one-line Git log for the past 3 changes. You can see this style format with tree format commit there at the bottom. If I git rebase interactive head tilde 3, then I'll get an error. I've got to stash my changes. I can't do a rebase when there's anything on my working copy. So let's stash my changes and try that rebase again. Git will pop up an editor for me with these 3 instructions, picking these 3 changes. I can change the first one to reword, save, quit, and Git will give me the editor that Jujutsu gave me. Git will also give me a lot more details about what's happening in the rebase. So it will give me the command that I'm doing currently and anything that's left to do. Interactive rebasing is awesome, don't get me wrong, but that's cumbersome. To edit a single change, I had to get rid of whatever I was working on, stash it, and then go and set up some instructions so that Git knew what I wanted to do. In Jujutsu, that's one command, and it's the same command as if I was describing something normally. Interactive rebasing is a separate mode. Git is modal. Like editors like Vim, Git is modal. Now, in Vim, that comes with a lot of power. The Vim motions allow you to jump around and do really cool things that are very hard to achieve in a more beginner-friendly editor. But the modality comes at a cost. Git has staging area commands, commit commands, and history commands all separate. You've got to learn these 3 things, and if you can't do one, then you can't do its thing. If you're not used to history editing in Git, You've got to learn how to do that before you can edit history. Jujutsu isn't modal, though. Its staging area doesn't exist, so there's no staging area commands. You edit them with the same commands that you do normal commits. And there's no history editing commands either. Those two are edited with normal commits. It looks like maybe Git doesn't need to be modal to have all the power. It's just normal. And what that means is that while Git forces you into this repetitive workflow of write some code, write a commit message, write some code, write a commit message, Jujutsu allows you to be the director of your own movie of commits. You can decide to make your code however you want. Chop it, change it, edit it again. You can touch up bits of your code, make your code into a canvas that has gorgeous commits, split out beautifully, so that your reviewers can understand what you're writing about, so that your commits truly tell a story. Now, many of you may be thinking, this sounds awesome, and it does. It is. But you may be worried, can I really move my whole workflow into Jujutsu? Jujutsu is a fairly new tool, and you've just told me a little while ago that the Gerrit integration is very new. Are you sure there won't be other things that I'm missing? And you're in luck, because Jujutsu is very extensible. I mentioned the Gerrit upload command, and I suppose I'm at the Gerrit User Summit, I'd better talk about it. You can upload the current change, a previous one, or, some crazy rev set. Here's one that would upload everything after X that was written by me. And you can also specify which branch you're setting. For example, you could set main, and that would correspond to the bit with heads ref 4 that you would in Gerrit. But before we had this Gerrit integration, I was already using Jujutsu with Gerrit. The way I would do that is I would create a new change on top of whatever I wanted to push. And then I would push using Git. Because in a co-located repository, you can use Git alongside Jujutsu, and Jujutsu will make sure they're kept in sync. And you can add in an alias for that. Here's an example alias I wrote that could create a new change on top of whatever you're trying to push, and then push it up. And that could be used like so, JJ, my Gerrit upload, the current change, or the previous one. But aliases don't just extend to commands. You can also add aliases for rev sets, the things that we've been using to specify what commit we want all along. I really miss from Git head tilde 5, to go back 5. So I wrote a little alias for it. Here's my rev set alias, and now I can do back at 5 and go back 5 commits. As you can see, if I run back 1 here, I'll get this KP change, CI correct build workflow IP. Now, Jujutsu also uses revset aliases internally. So if you want to change the behavior of Jujutsu, you might be able to do that. We've got this immutable heads here. This is how Jujutsu determines whether to let you edit a commit, because editing a commit will require a force push on Git. And you don't necessarily want to do that if your coworkers are not using Jujutsu and they have their own branches. By default, Jujutsu takes any untracked remote branch and stops you from editing it. But you could change that to any branch that was ever pushed up if you wanted to. And Jujutsu also has a way to specify private commits. Here's a private commit rev set that I use to block myself from pushing any commits that start with private. Last thing, you could combine these. So here's my back alias again. And here's a script I wrote to call out to git range diff. Jujutsu's interdiff is not as powerful as Git's range diff. Git's range diff allows you to diff multiple commits at once, whereas interdiff only allows you to diff 1. But that's all right, because I've been able to use my back rev set, as well as Jujutsu's alias support, to add support for using range diff. And here's how I would use that. And here's what output it would give. As you can see, this is just Git's range diff format in Jujutsu. So come join me in the sun. Don't stay locked up inside the cave. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay, we've got another 50 minutes questions. Questions? Yeah, one from Tony, one moment. And I've got one as well.
Hello, hello, Sasa.
Hey.
So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Really interesting. So you described a commit that just happened in the past, right? You showed how you can actually attach
Yes.
a description to a commit.
Correct.
Can you upstream? Like, what would happen if you push that? Like, how can you do that? Like, I'm just struggling to understand how can you just persist that description to a Git server, for example.
So when you describe a commit, Jujutsu rebases the commits for you. So you will edit the description of the past commit, and then Jujutsu knows that you've changed the thing, and so it force pushes for you. So when you push that up to your Git server, say GitHub, that will be a force push.
Okay, so that will generate a new history.
So you generate a new history, yeah. If you're using it with Gerrit, then you will see, you have your change ID in your commit description, and you will see new patch sets uploaded. If you're using something like GitHub, then yes, you'll see a new history, and your reviewers will have to range diff or do something clever there.
Super cool. Cool, thank you.
Okay, sorry, Scott, and then I will do mine. Yeah.
I'm just curious. The Gerrit integration is fairly new. I looked at the patch set a while ago, but I didn't know if it had been integrated. How do you turn it on to generate change IDs automatically? Are you still using the commit message sort of like Git hooks, which I don't think Jujutsu does that, right?
No, Jujutsu doesn't do Git hooks at all. So previously there was you could set a commit message template, so you would generate a change ID there. With the new Git integration, when you try and push a change up, if it has no, with the new Gerrit integration, when you push a change up, if it has no change ID already, it will get one generated on upload.
I see. Okay. Thanks.
So yeah, again, about the Gerrit integration. So if you remember, also Git has actually a lot of power in terms of defining aliases, and actually, I believe for OpenStack, the OpenStack project also created some additional tooling around Git for making their life easier, right, and contributing to Gerrit. But the issue was really adoption, because if you start creating all your custom commands, all your extensions, then maybe a percentage of people will have that, but the majority will not, and then they will still struggle. So the JJ Gerrit, is that an extension or is natively supported?
That's natively supported nowadays. So,
okay,
so the alias that I showed you would have been an alias that you would have to add yourself, but now if you pull the latest version of upstream Jujutsu, it will have the Gerrit support in it.
Okay, and again, as checked, there is no need of hooks on anything, we'll just generate the Gerrit change ID. Yeah. And last but not least, so I know that Jujutsu can be plugged to standard Git server. So for instance, the development happens on GitHub, even if people are using actually Jujutsu for developing Jujutsu. And then there is, of course, the Gerrit integration. Maybe people use it also with GitLab. But also the Jujutsu project is creating a Jujutsu server, right? And that is going to be a kind of, let's say, new thing that will do review and everything. So what is the status? What is the aim for the Jujutsu project? Just to use their own server, or what do you see the future going to?
At the moment, the Git backend is the only usable backend for Jujutsu. There's a native backend, and you can try it out, but it's not production ready, and there's no server for it. I think there are some people, maybe I want to say ESRC, or ERSC, East River Source Control, who are working on maybe a Jujutsu native server. But I'm not super up to date with that, so you'd have to ask maybe on the Jujutsu Discord or something like that.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? One more, yeah.
Hi, does it already support LFS? In Git?
No, it doesn't yet support LFS. There's open issues for that. People really want that, but it doesn't.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering the same thing. Thank you.
Questions? More questions? Yes, no? Yeah.
Continue on Lucas' question. So will the Jujutsu coming server with code review, will that basically replace Gerrit, or will we continue to use Gerrit in the future?
I as I say, I'm not up to date on that. I would presume that if East River Source Control is making a server, they would do code review in that and not use Gerrit. But you know, I think the Git backend would presumably be supported, you know, in perpetuity because Git is very popular right now.
Seems like an extremely big project to
yeah, right.
create a new code review system, like, well, with all the features
Oh,
that we
100%.
have in Gerrit.
I mean, you know, Gerrit is incredible.
Okay, thank you very much. And now, am I up to date, Scott? Is your turn?
Yeah, thank you very much. If you have any more
blame
questions,
Danny.
send me via email. Thanks.
Thank you.